This podcast is brought to you by Touch a Life.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to TALRadio. You are tuning into our brand new podcast series, Mindful Conversation with Dr. Sampath. The star of this podcast is Dr. Sampath, a management thinker, best-selling author, and mindful entrepreneur. He's a master at using stories and parables to inspire leadership and innovation. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you over in this show, and we'll have a lot to converse about. It's primarily going to be about entrepreneurship, leadership. This series is done with a hope that we'll inspire young social entrepreneurs and anyone who would want to cultivate values of leadership and want to go ahead in life. So that is the idea behind this podcast, and I think you are the perfect person to talk about it. And before we start the conversation, I would just like to plug in that Dr. Sampath has this amazing Instagram page called The Soul Kathas. And I would really love all of you to follow it because it's very insightful. And there are these short stories. He takes it from history, his personal experience, and it's just very motivating. So I would really urge all our listeners to kind of take a look into that Instagram page. With that, we will start today's episode. Today, we are going to have the conversation regarding values and leadership. And this is your area of expertise.
Yes, it is an area that I've been studying for the last 3.5 decades. Yet, I don't think I have a complete understanding. I have a fair amount of understanding of this space.
Okay. So I would like to start by asking, what does a value-based leadership mean to you? And what do you feel makes it very different from all the other leadership categories? So what are leadership styles?
There are different kinds of leadership styles that have been spoken for a long time that we all know. Even value-based leadership has been spoken about. I think the challenge when we speak about value-based leadership is, first, we need to understand what are values. I think that there itself we have a huge difference, or people perceive value in their own way. To me, values are the beliefs you hold within yourself, which governs your behavior in any given context. Some of these beliefs are known to you, while others are not, yet they govern your behavior. And as a leader, I strongly believe that one should be aware of one's own beliefs as a leader and how those beliefs impact the way they manage their own team members, their own business, their own interactions with customers, everybody. I don't think many leaders think about and have understood what exactly are their beliefs, which is making them do what they do and why they do what they do. So to me, value-based leadership is being self-aware, being aware of why one is doing what one is doing, and being able to think through the decisions based on their own belief system. And also, whenever there's a dysfunctionality, the ability to sit and understand, why did I do this the way I did it? Is there a better way to do? And what were the beliefs which made me do what I did? And is there a way that I can reframe my beliefs so that I will be appropriate to the context? I think when we talk about value-based leadership, we are so focused on the right and wrong values. To me, value-based leadership is your ability to do what is relevant and to do what is needed than what you want. And this is a huge difference that many leaders, I don't think, completely understand this. A value-based leader is one who serves the idea, serves the purpose of the institution, serves the very existence of the institution, not himself or herself. They do what the organization needs. They do what will be appropriate to the context. And that, to me, is not something which is natural for many. Therefore, for me, value-based leadership is one's ability to really, really understand the context and be relevant to it, so that you're not only thinking you're just, but everybody feels you're being just.
That's a wonderful way to put it. I never thought of it that way. Not because for me, values were always 0 and 1, the good and bad. And it's really interesting to know your take on it and how it could be basically what is needed to be done rather than kind of segregating it into the bad and the good. I would like to ask this. That is, so how can a leader anchor himself in a set of values, and how are those values cultivated from within? What is the process like?
I think one of the first things that a value-based leader or a leader should do is to believe that he or she is only serving a cause, and they have to move away from they are doing things rather than they are doing things that are required to be done. They are not the heroes or the heroines, but they are the doers which the institution needs. It's also important to understand that as a leader, when I am making a call, I need to be very clear that I am free of biases of any kind, including my own biases for my own thinking. It's that important. I'll have to unclutter my mind. I'll have to be mindful. I have to be here and now and just be able to do what is demanded out of me. The other thing which is very important for a value-based leader, or the value that I will see as very critical, is the ability to lead oneself and therefore lead others. Many leaders don't think that leading themselves is an important part of leadership. As long as you're not able to lead yourself, which means you're not able to correct yourself when you need to correct yourself, you're not able to be relevant when you need to be relevant, and look at them and have the ability and humility to correct them, you will not be able to help others do the same in the organization. It is also important for a leader to be able to live what he or she is asking out of his team, those around him or her, and demonstrate that. That is why many of us have heard this statement right from our childhood, but I don't know how many of us have really understood and integrated it in our life. Action speaks louder than words. A value-based leader is one who is continuously demonstrating through what he or she is doing rather than what he or she is telling. For the simple reason, if you tell people, listen. If you do, people follow. And for a value-based leader, getting that followership is more important than having people who only listen.
And do you think that this all again goes back to having that self-awareness, to be aware about what they have been doing on day-to-day life and correcting it when and as and when required, and then moving ahead and then showing people how it's done?
I strongly believe that there is a need for a high degree of self-awareness if you want to be a value-based leader. And I also believe that one needs to take time off to either meditate or spend time with oneself in silence, have the ability to reflect on what is going on, what went on, and review that in the mind so that you can see, hey, was there a better way to do this? Was I appropriate in the context? Was I relevant to the context? Sometimes what you do might be very, very uncanny, not the run of the mill, yet the result will be phenomenal. And for that, you'll have to get away from what you're used to doing rather than be able to do what is appropriate to that context. So to me, uncluttering is possible when you spend time with yourself and when you learn some form of meditation. Personally, I've been practicing transcendental meditation for the last 40 years, and I know for sure how beneficial it has been to me. It is something that allows me to remain bias-free. It allows me to understand the context and do what the context demands than what I would want to do in that situation. And it also allows me to stand up to what I believe in and be able to voice that very clearly. When you are self-aware, one of the things that you tend to develop in yourself as a leader is, even before you do something, you have thought through why you want to do what you want to do. So when somebody is asking you, why are you doing this? You don't even have to take a fraction of a second to respond to them, because you've already thought through why you're doing what you're doing. And that makes this leadership style very, very different.
And I was just wondering, so to have a value-based leadership, while you are in a situation that is calm and you are okay in taking decisions, you are sane enough to take the right decisions based out of your core values. But there are often situations where we encounter a lot of pressure and leaders especially, in those situations, it's very difficult to kind of think about your value system and act accordingly. In those situations, what would you say? How can leaders navigate such situations?
I mean, as you ask this question, Pavithra, the one thing that comes to my mind is a film by name Invictus, which is based on the real life of Nelson Mandela, the first year that he took over as the president of Free South Africa. And the kind of pressures he has, unbelievable, because the apartheid has just got over and there is so much of feeling of wanting to revenge. And one side, there's a pressure from his own community to take revenge on the whites. And the way he handles it and the way he responds to those situations is unbelievable. He has that knack and ability to go above the kind of pressures that are on him and still be able to do what is needed. I mean, one of the scenes that I remember is they want to take away the Springboks, which is the rugby team of South Africa. And they all almost vote to remove that. And he comes and says, we are doing something wrong because this is the pride of the whites. And if we take away that from them, we will lose them. And we need them because they have the businesses, they have the police, they have everything that is needed for this country to grow. And he reinstates that name. So for me, that's a very powerful film. And I would say if anybody is interested in value-based leadership or even just leadership, they should watch this film Invictus. It's a gripping, and it's based on real life of Nelson Mandela. I have seen that film at least 50 to 60 times. And every time I see it, I see something new in it. It's a very, very powerful film. It gives the answer to the question you asked in several scenarios. Under pressure, how do you deal with situations? And still do what is needed rather than what everybody around you wants you to do, including his family.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you mentioned about this movie. I would like to know a bit about your personal experiences with a high pressure situation, how you have been able to ground yourself on values during those situations.
I will share one situation which was very early in my career. Not that I worked for too many years, but I was this young personal officer in a large public sector. And there was this... I worked in HAL, which is the company which is the large public sector which produces aircraft. And I was in the avionics division in Hyderabad, where everything that goes into the cockpit of an aircraft is manufactured there, that to a fighter. So therefore, the precision and the technology that is needed is very, very high. And we were recruiting apprentices who go through 1 year of training in the company, those who have cleared ITI. And we had 107 vacancies, for which we used to get around 2,000 applications. This was being done by my training manager, and for some reason, the vigilance realized or caught him taking bribe for selecting the candidates. So the entire selection was put on my lap, and they said, do this selection. So I got hold of 10 engineers, did a quick multiple choice question paper, got the same 10 set of people to evaluate it. So Sunday morning, we did the exam between 10 and 12. We had 10 engineers sitting and correcting these 2,000 sheets. And by 4 o'clock, we had the merit list. And I went and put the merit list on the gate notice board by 4:30. The next day morning, the union leader came to my office and said, you'll have to remove that list. You'll have to change those names in the list. And I told him on my dead body, nothing will be changed in that. So the union leaders, they could be very, very nasty. And he started calling me names and he said, you're being insensitive, you're not understanding. I said, what is that I'm not understanding? He said, employees' children are there and we want them to be taken for the apprenticeship. So, and then he went to say that I will break your leg if you come out and all that. And I gave him back that if you break 2 legs, I'll at least break 1 leg of yours. It was a heated argument, and then he left with a huff. And I sat back and asked myself, what is this guy asking me? He said, employees' children should get a chance. Fair. He could have shouted at me, all that is fine. So I went and made a management note saying that 5% of the vacancy should be reserved for employees' children. And I put it up to my MD, got it approved, and then put a merit list of employees' children, severing that 5% of the quota for them. And I can tell you, even today, that principle is in vogue. Now,
Wonderful.
I could have got upset with the union leader for all that he did to me. But can I sit and think clearly as to what is being asked? Is it fair? And can I do what is appropriate and relevant? And I can tell you, the next day when he saw this, he came and he apologized. And thereafter, any selection that I'm sitting in, if anybody goes and asks him for some favor, he'll say, who's in the committee? If they say Sampath is in the committee, don't worry, he will do what is right. He never
That's
came
wonderful.
to me. I was leaving the company. He said, we had some good people and they're also going away. That is the kind of respect you earn. When you go beyond your ego being hurt, when you go beyond your I versus you, then you're able to do what is relevant. I have another scenario in which I was a consultant. I had come out of the corporate world and I was consulting with this company, which is a multinational company. And the head of the plant, I had worked with the top team, but the head of the plant didn't sit through my workshop. But all the heads of the department sat through my workshop. 2 months later, the head of the plant called me and said, Sampath, it's 2 months since you did the workshop. I want to know what changes these people have made. Would it be possible for you to come and join me for a review meeting? Fortunately, I was in Bangalore and this company was in Hosur. So I said, what time? He said 2 o'clock. So 1:59, I reached his office and all the participants of the workshop, which is the functional heads, were sitting in the boardroom. And between 2 and 2:30, he is talking to me, nothing head going. His secretary served a cup of tea for us. Finally, we walked into the boardroom at 2:30. And then when we were sitting there, he asked everyone, what changes have you made? And everybody said what they have made. And he said, I don't see any of these on the shop floor. And what is the problem? His bad luck or my good luck or my bad luck, I don't know. He turned around and asked me, what do you think is the problem, Sampath? I was hardly 35. I said, do you really want the answer? He said, that's why I called you. Then I said, you are the problem. And he said, what? What do you mean? I said, look, you called the meeting at 2 o'clock. These 15 people here have been waiting here from 2 to 2:30 for us. You and I were in your room. We were not doing anything head going. And if you treat these people the way you're treating them, I pity how the rest of the organization treats them. If you don't value their time, how is anybody else going to value their time? His face went red. Maybe today I would respond a little differently, saying that maybe I will take this up one-on-one with you. I wouldn't have answered that in the group. But you can be rest assured, for the 15 of them, I was a hero. For the plant head, I was a villain. And his face went red. And that was the only assignment I had at that point of time. I didn't know where my next check is going to come from. So I used to tell people, if you want to do consulting and if you want to tell what the client wants to hear, then you are not going to be a great consultant. If you can tell them what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear, then over a period of time, your credibility will build and you will make a very good decision and people will respect you for who you are. So therefore, 2 months later, he came back to me and he understood what I said. And people also realized that he also was making some shift as a leader. So sometimes the willingness to take risk for a purpose, for a cause, for a value that you stand for very deeply is very essential. And I realized that I have done this at any cost. I have also, in the last 40 years that I've been working with clients in different cultures, different countries, I've taken responsibility for what I do. I believe that when I talk about values, I have the least freedom. Once it so happened that I was in Dubai and I was to go for a training session, and till that point of time, I've never been late to a session. The L&D head was supposed to take me from the hotel, and last minute he said, Sampath, I'm running late. You take a cab and come off. So when I sat in the cab, I didn't know that there were 2 knowledge cities in Dubai. So this taxi went in the different direction. And I told her, hey, usually I don't go this way. It's the other way, where I see the following things. Oh, then he said, oh, it's the other one. And I was delayed by half an hour. So the first thing that I did when I entered the classroom was, I told the L&D head, I will not take my consulting fee today. And it was not a small money. It was fairly a large money. So how much of ownership are we willing to take for our actions? That will define who you are as a person. You may end up doing a mistake. Are you willing to take the complete ownership for that and do what is required to be able to set that right? Or take the ownership in a way that you will not get into such a situation again if there is something that went wrong. That's very important. So these are three different kinds of situations that I have shared. And I have many such situations in personal life, professional life, all kinds of places. And for me, being able to do what is needed is more important than what I would want. And to be honest here, not that I've always succeeded in being able to do that, but I think 9 out of 10 times I can do what is needed than what I want. And I also realize that it calls for a lot of sacrifice and humility to be able to do that.
That's wonderful. I really love the narration and the stories and the kind of emotion that it carried. And just to summarize, you can also add your points. So what I understood from these stories is that in the first situation, what you had chosen to do is, instead of taking something as a personal attack, you decided to kind of sit back and analyze the situation and realize what is really required to the situation, and you responded to it instead of taking it to your heart. And in the second situation, what I felt, I was just thinking of a quote that I have seen in recent times in social media, which is, be a rebel, but be a rebel with a cause. So I think that is something which, it's reflected through your experience, where you had to kind of tell the leader that he's the problem and he should probably, look into it. And it probably would have been a very difficult situation back then, especially when, you were just beginning. And these are very interesting factors. Yeah. And I would like to ask you, what else would you add to this? These are what my learnings were. What else would you add to this?
I think the courage to stand up to what you believe in and your conviction in what you do, very important. You cannot be shaky in what you're doing. When I told him that I will not change the merit list on my dead body, I meant it. That is the level of conviction I had. Because I said, it has to be fair and it has to be fair. Those who did well will get the opportunity to be an apprentice in the company. Those who didn't do well will not get. But at the same time, it's a fact that the employees have given their blood and sweat to the company and they deserve certain privileges. And if that is so, then let's make that privilege very public. In fact, I made one more statement to the union leader the following day. Now, don't come and tell me my union member should get more than the other union member. This is employees' children. Whoever they are, they will, if they are in the merit list, their names will be there. And he smiled at me and said, I will not ask that. Don't worry. And what is very important is, if you are seen and if you act fairly, people test you for a while and then they start believing in you as a person. And the commitment they bring for what you do is very, very different. So therefore, I think one of the things that I believe is, if you are doing something, you should first be very clear why you're doing what you're doing and stand by it under all circumstances. The minute the risk is high, don't change your stance. But if you got a new information which you are not aware of, which makes your decision not so relevant, and there is another decision which is more relevant, which is coming from another quarter, don't hesitate to accept that decision. It's not about your decision. It's about the decision. And that decision should be appropriate, relevant, and get the best out of what you're attempting to achieve. And that's very important for a value-based leader or even any leader.
Wonderful. I was just thinking, now this is going to be a question that requires probably a very long answer. And but being critically aware of that, I would just like to ask, what are some of the practical tips that people can follow to cultivate a sense of value-based leadership?
I think one, I told that earlier also in my response to your questions, I will have to be self-aware. We use this word very loosely, empathy. I think I'll have to put myself in the other man's shoe and ask myself, if somebody made this decision against me, will I be happy with it? I think that is something that every leader should do, a value-based leader should do. And if I think I will be happy if that decision is made for me. I think it's more likely that that's going to be an appropriate decision. It's also important to be aware of one's own biases. As a leader, at some point of time, you tend to get a little blind and you miss out your own biases. Particularly if you've been a very successful leader, you start believing you know what will work and what will not work. But the reality is every situation is independent. It is not the same as the previous situation. At the most, it can be similar to the previous situation. So if I believe what worked earlier will work now, I will be mistaken thoroughly. So therefore, it is important for me to look at each situation independent of the previous experiences of mine and be able to take a call based on what that situation is all about. Another very important skill one needs to develop, learn, maybe integrate is ability to read a situation. Many of us are in a rush to take a decision. We don't necessarily look at all the factors. There are several factors: people, business, the customer, the product, the market. I don't know what all factors are there. Even with the people, on different days, it can be different things. It could be very dynamic. I mean, on the day that you are actually trying to take a call, your team members are not in a right frame of mind. Can you take that into account? Can you be that dynamic in making your call about what you're going to decide upon? So therefore, one skill that every leader or particularly value-based leaders should build is, how do I read a context as deeply as I can? And the more deeply you read a context, the more appropriate you can be. But if you skim through a context, and if you think you already have understood the context, there's every likelihood that you may take a decision which may not be relevant to the context. Another very important thing that I feel a value-based leader should look at is not always think that I have to make all the decisions. Use the minds which are there and look at which decision seems more appropriate to the context. Ask, seek, learn, and then arrive at a decision, rather than jumping into a decision without even having thought through or not having heard what people think. Because each one may have a different understanding of the context. And if you can pick up their understanding, it'll add to your own understanding and it'll broaden your view on understanding the context. So therefore, it is important to see that how do I naturally build these skills? The fact is, it's not that you don't have the skill, but you use it in a place where it is very important for you, not necessarily in all the places. A value-based leader is one who can use this in all the places and constantly keep on nurturing and building in himself or herself the skills that make him or her very, very relevant to the context, and constantly build the ability to read a context as close to the reality as possible. I think these would be some of my tips or some of my advice. But I think above all, one should be very highly self-aware and should constantly do something to keep that awareness heightened, like a meditation or a hobby that you are deeply involved in, be it gardening, be it playing instrumental music, or even singing. At that moment, you forget everything and you are in it completely. So that is the ability that I need to have when I'm making decisions. I need to forget everything and put myself 100% in that situation.
This has been a very wonderful summary of what we have been conversing for the last 30 minutes. Very beautiful way to put it. So I came across a quote. This is primarily for the listeners. So a lot of people might be wondering. This whole conversation has been about values and leadership. So some of them might be wondering that, hey, I'm not a leader. How are these things applicable to me? So for that, I was just thinking about this quote that I came across just the other day. It says that if you're not sure of what you want to be, invest in yourself. Invest in creating values for yourself. And I think these values are applicable to every person. Like you said, we need to apply this not just in specific situations, but in every situation possible. And it is something we can cultivate over time. So this again brings to your philosophy of everyone being possible of excellence.
True. And I believe that leadership is not just positional. Mm-hmm. Every time you are taking a decision and you have the right to take a decision, you are the leader in that situation. And it could be any decision that you're taking. I can give you an example. In 90, when I was an Ashoka Fellow, I started interacting with the corporate and leaders to a great extent And in one company, I had gone to see this managing director around 3:30 or 3:45, and it was a tea time. And the boy who was serving tea to all the employees walked up to me with a cup of tea and served me. And I don't think he took anybody's permission. And he demonstrated a leadership there because he believed that everybody who comes to my company is important and I need to take care of them. So therefore, it is not about my position. It's about if I'm able to take a decision in a given situation, for that situation, you are the leader.
Wonderful.
So therefore, if we see from that perspective, all of us are leaders and all of us are making decisions. And are decisions relevant, appropriate to the context, and do they get us what they need to get?
That's a very, very nice way to wrap up this conversation. And this was such an insightful conversation, Dr. Sampath, because these are things which, like you said, most of us believe that when we're talking about leadership, we immediately think about corporate people in the high position or someone who is doing business. We kind of underestimate what leadership means in day-to-day life, like taking day-to-day decisions. Thank you for clearing that up for me as well as for the listeners. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and there is so much of things to sit back and think about and see how I can incorporate in my life. I'm sure the listeners would also feel the same. So thank you once again for being a part of the Mindful Conversation with Dr. Sampath, and we'll be continuing with more episodes. We'll have a lot more conversation regarding leadership, entrepreneurship, and everything that is your area of expertise.
Thank you, Pavithra. I enjoy these conversations, and many a time it's only after you ask me a question I think of what the response should be. I thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you so much, and I hope the listeners will enjoy.
This is your host Pavithra signing off. So we'll come up with yet another episode next week. So stay tuned for Mindful Conversation with Dr. Sampath.
You have just listened to TALRadio podcast. For more podcasts, visit www.touchalife.org.